Oh, I think it's working. Um, it's not showing me the chat for some reason. Hold on. Ah, okay, cool. I think it's working. Let me. Okay, so this is, I did it. Okay, I don't know who all is here still. I don't know if these three people are still here. This is my first time like live streaming to an audience ever. It's normally just like my friends, so excuse me for awkwardness or whatever. Um, yeah, hello. So this uh this is definitely not what I expected whenever I posted this video. Like the fucking Oh yeah, by the way, I'm gonna be swearing. I don't swear in the videos, but I'm gonna be swearing here. It had the level of discourse that it spawned was not something I expected nor intended. It was kind of whack. Welcome, welcome, Party Sepe. I'm sorry for scaring you. Okay, let me see if I can actually like pull up the stream under the thing. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Nope, not what I want. Uh, hello, maybe? Can I get the like website up so people can see what I'm looking at? Welcome. I'm happy you're alive. Um, no, that's not what I want. Foolish. I want browser capture, I think. Window capture is what I want. And then we say YouTube, and then we create new. There we go. Okay. All right. Now let's figure this out so that it doesn't look like total garbage. This is correct. Done. I don't know what I'm messing with right now. Okay. Oh, if am I quite actually? Yeah, I should have asked about that. Is the audio bad? Is the audio bad? Yeah, yeah, it's in light mode. And also I'm like well, partly because I'm on incognito, partly because I am like big believer in light mode. Um, down. There we go. Yes. Yeah, the comments were crazy. So I actually I couldn't have ever anticipated how insane it was gonna be. Yeah, and if the audio is bad, say something to me because I won't know. Um, yeah. So first, I'm kind of like, I have it, I'm on an incognito tab, so it's gonna be like just the top comments that show up, and then I'll read them, and then I'll talk about them. Yeah, let me zoom in a little bit. Can I get these fucking videos on the side out of here? Hi, turtles. Um, is there a way I can do that? I might just have to like do a little bit of this. There, cool. I might wait for like a couple more seconds to see if more people show up, just to give people like 2 seconds to show up, and then we'll see. We'll see. I'm curious to see whether or not people who disliked it are going to be here or not. That's kind of like the biggest curiosity in my brain right now. I saw like there was one or two people here earlier, and I'd be happy to talk to them. I feel like people are misunderstanding how I actually feel about a lot of subjects. It's true. Wait, it's true. I typically stream on Twitch, but I figure that I ought to stream on YouTube so that it has the maximum amount of reach to the people that watch the thing. YouTube streaming kind of sucks. LOL. Let me look at one thing. Okay, I think we're good. I'm gonna go ahead and start reading stuff. Letting a scene mentioned instantly makes me in real life. What do you? Oh, we'll get to it. You know what? We'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. All right. I'm gonna just tackle them in sequential order. If anyone has like any questions about anything, feel free to message them, and I will try and talk about them if I can. Cool? Awesome. Cool. So, we've got this one. Even if Kris Slash is wrong, I don't see how it's just an excuse to bring back Kris Knight, whether or not they did the attack, they still get knighted in the cutscene, so it's not like you need a theory to validate it. And I'm, hi, hi, hi. You didn't bring up the sprite name as a counterpoint, as it's literally called Kris Slash. I thought that was, or Knight Slash. I think that's like really semantic, so I just chose not to. My favorite letter. This in particular, okay. So we're getting into it. I'll say hi as people come in, but we're like getting into it now. This is what we're looking at right now. Um, and this is probably like the best counterpoint to like the entire video as a whole, because whether they're right in that whether or not Kris didn't or did not slash, Kris is complacent in the action. Therefore, like they're in on it, you know? In game, what? Uh, I don't know what you mean by it. You can see how badly it's colored in gang. I don't know what that means. But this is true. Now, my point in making like one of the reasons why I made this video is because I thought that Kris, like the video made by Double Dan, is the most of the evidence, if not all of the evidence, minus Rousey's dialogue, is really like semantic and built upon misinterpretation, and it kind of drove me crazy while watching it and seeing people just like agree blindly. Um, and that was like the whole reason why I chose to be. I don't even know how you would word it. Blunt. I don't even know, because like a lot of people, and I'm sure we'll get into it. Counterpoints. Yeah, reasonable counterpoint. A lot of people thought that I was like mean, and I don't really think that I was mean. Except for like there's like one rude bit in this video. Let me duplicate this tab so I can actually like poke through it. Shut up. Uh, the one rude thing I think that's in this video is when I cut to Ralsei afterwards. This little bit right here. Let me turn this down. Forward. This little bit's rude. I think this little bit's rude, but I kept it in because I thought it was kind of funny. I'm not using Linux, no. I'm using Windows. I will be switching to Linux soon though, because they're discontinuing Windows 10, and I don't want to switch to Windows 11. So come October. Man, this is like the only like rude thing I think is in the video, and I kept it in because I thought it was kind of funny, and also not like too rude. It's actually really crazy because like this entire one of the biggest when it came to this video, the biggest thing I was worried about was whether was my presentation and if I thought I was being too rude. And I ran it past like several people, and they were all like, "Yeah, it's fine." I asked specifically about how mean they thought I was being, or how mean it came across as that I was being, more like, and they were like, "Yeah, it's chill." And then people just didn't agree. They were like, "Actually, you're of the devil." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Um, Later, he goes back and says the slash from the left, which also means Kris did it somehow. This means he's a hypocrite. Shows him explaining why he thinks so, and it making perfect sense. I think this me saying a hypocrite was I shouldn't have said hypocrite. Probably like the best point to bring up against me is the fact that I used the word hypocrite, because he's not being hypocritical. People like the slash theory and didn't like that you were debunking it, so they said you were being mean. So was that, yeah, I mean, true. I think that is definitely part of it. I think also, as we will also get into later, that they were primed by like some discourse elsewhere about the Deltarune fandom being toxic or something, and then brought that here, and they were like, "You are the prime reason. You are like the prime example of why Chris Slash is, or why the Deltarune fandom is toxic. You are evil." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know at all what you're referencing." But I do anyway. I do think I shouldn't have called him a hypocrite. I should have used a different word. I should have just said that. I should have completely. Honestly, you know what I should have done? I should have axed the whole one. He's being a hypocrite. Two. I should have just kept the two part, which is that because of the scene's ambiguity, you can make up a reason for Ralsei to be doing it. You can make up a reason for Toriel to be doing it. You can make up a reason for Susie to be doing it, ish. Like you can make up a reason. There's a really funny image. Let me see if I can find it of like Ralsei slash. Hold on. Someone sent it to me forever ago. Also, let me do we should I get music in here? Is it too quiet? Are the ADHD heads in need of dire stimulus? Yeah, this uh, this image rules. Ralsei slash is no, it's genius. Can you whenever you say little, this is another thing because people didn't really cite me being like what they thought was rude. Can you tell me what you thought was rude? Because I think I know what you're talking about, but besides like the one bit I mentioned earlier where I'm like explicitly pretty rude. I will, dude. I'll get like a GIF in the top right corner. Start playing GIFs all over everywhere. Let me upload this really quick so people can know what I'm talking about. This image like actually rules. It's Ralsei slash. This is Ralsei slash. Oh, it's gone. Please do. Because a lot of people were just like, I think a lot what happened is they got mad and then because I was definitely very blunt and that was an intentional choice. Like I said things were bad and I said things were bad and I said things were dumb. Um, which one I'm saying I'm like I'm talking about the theory itself. Like I'm not talking about the guy. I don't think the guy is dumb or bad at all. I don't know anything about Double Dan. I know about his video and I don't like his video. It would be really outlandish to like accuse him of being bad and stupid and all that stuff. That would just be like wrong. But the video is bad and silly at points. So that's what I said. Okay, here we go. This rules. He swiftly took Chris's sword and downed Susie because she was closest to him, and then slashed himself to look like a victim. Why did Chris get knighted? The knight just felt like it, I think. This video rules. This rules. This is awesome. Anyway, people bringing up Toriel slash theory in the comments are funny. Oh, true, the fountain slash? Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Okay. Back to the actual comments now. Anyway. Um. Yeah, it was supposed to set the tone. Like the theory drove me a little crazy. Where was I? Okay, hypocrite. I already talked about it. I think I shouldn't have called him a hypocrite. I think that's valid criticism toward me. Star Walker slash Drew, think about it. Author telling the Chris, author telling, author telling, awful telling, maybe? Author telling that Chris hates freedom is like saying gamers hate games. I don't know what this is trying to communicate. I think it's trying to say that me saying Chris hates freedom is bad, but like they do. They don't like you progressing towards freedom. I'm sure they would like to be free, but all of the freedom that we have progressed towards, at least in the weird route, and in my view, possibly the Shadow Crystal route, is the freedom of the player. I do think it comes across kind of like a gotcha. Like I understand that, which makes people think that it's like I'm trying to get one over on the guy. I think if I were to go back, um, because like here's the thing, there were some it originally was more like gotcha-y. There are some things I decided not to include because they didn't pertain to the theory and they pertained more to the guy. And I thought that was like I came to the realization that I was doing that and that I thought that kind of sucked. And I guess the tonation just kind of like carried over. But like he says some things about he has some like really bad interpretations of like sword rat stuff, and I wanted to crash out over that and put that in the video, but I decided against it. Player slash because we played 25 bucks to play the game. True. Think about it. Except, I mean, everything is technically our fault if you like. You're not wrong. Um, slash three. Love the incredibly aggressive and mean video after saying you harass you go to hell. No, I don't really think I was very like aggressive. I understand why people like misconstrued me as mean. That's what a lot of these are going to be. I'm gonna just be reiterating this point a lot, to be honest. It's just gonna be me. A lot of it is going to be me saying, yeah, I can kind of get why you thought I was mean, but like I wasn't, in my humble opinion. Um, yeah. And I don't want people to harass them because that would be really fucking weird if I did. Newbert slash three? True. Can I not like click read more on this one? I have read this comment. I know that there is more. That's annoying. Well, I guess I have to skip it. Why is it doing that? I hope if that keeps up, then I will look into why it's doing that because it's annoying. True, I actually did it. It's all my fault. Okay. Big read time. Okay, still a fervent Kris slash believer. Here are a few points. Yeah, Kris slashing Susie and Ralph saying the mental minigame doesn't have to be foreshadowing Kris slash. This point is probably one of the least important bits of evidence. Still, I think it's an interesting parallel between our control over Kris and how the Knight controls them, whether that be by blackmail, a secret alliance, or whatever. Kris cares for Susie and Ralph, no one disputes that. Whether Kris or the Knight slash at the end of the chapter, it must be hard for them to react so calmly. Both there and the third mental minigame, though, they stomach it and move on. In any case, I think the actual slash itself is far better evidence. Um, I think it's an interesting parallel between kind of maybe. The reason why I like put so much emphasis on it is because Double Dan says it's one of the most important pieces of evidence, and it's not. So I I am like specifically a lot of people also like criticize me for not bringing up a counterpoint and not like supplying my own theory, but that wasn't the point of the video. The point of the video was to be like, this video isn't very good, actually. So I don't I the whole point was that it wasn't to propagate my own theory. Even though I kind of did a little bit with the Shadow Crystal stuff. And also you would the implied idea is that hey, I probably prefer Kris not Kris, but probably prefer Night Slash to Kris Slash if I'm trying to debunk Kris Slash, you know. Yeah, cool. Okay. I don't really see the hypocrisy in DD changing his theory. In either case, left right or right left, the effect makes no sense to come on for the light. Yeah, I don't think I should have used hypocrisy either. The slash here looks, sounds, and acts nothing like any attack the knight has ever done. If Toby didn't want us to misinterpret the scene, he would have just used the fill tool to make it black with red and outline. Yeah, I do think that it is dubious on purpose to sow discord and make people talk about it, much like how it was the end of chapter 2 was dubious. Uh, when I analyzed the Kris Knighted theory, I analyzed how the flavor text goes exactly how the three heroes go down. Kris kneels, Susie drops, Naga. Sure, that does happen. I can take, but you seem like a nice fellow. Everybody makes mistakes. Bye bye. Bye bye. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I wanted to make this theory because I think people are um, misunderstanding how I am as a person. Anyway, 3 about freedom being bad. Whose freedom? If Kris is so opposed to it, why do they seem to relish relish it? Why do they scream when Spamton winds up not being able to break his strings? Why does Ram seem so adamant that they want it? Why do they seem just fine with Gerson when he's basically introduced by talking about it? Kris seems trapped as well, trapped in a body they can't control, and trapped helping to hurt their friends, trapped in a story that isn't their own. I think the motif of freedom is complicated and we're going to need more chapters to fully grasp it. Saying that's why Toriel is uncomfortable doesn't just sit right with me. Yeah. Well, I think in my opinion, I've always held the belief that like Kris is screaming over like Kris is really uncomfortable because they are seeing themselves in Spamton. Um, not be I don't think they're screaming or upset that he wasn't able to break his strings. I think they're upset because they Spamton out of all the secret bosses is definitely like by far the one that is like Kris the most in that they're the most like directly controlled by something else. Um, and I think that's why Kris is super uncomfortable, made uncomfortable by them. And also, who's to say that Kris even wants to interact with the guy? We're making Kris interact with the guy, you know? Why does Ram seem so adamant about that they want it? We don't know that Kris actually wants it though. Just because another character is adamant about it, and just because Kris might have been like that in the past, does not necessarily mean that they are still like wanting it. Why do they seem just fine with Gerson when he's basically introduced by talking about it? Fair point. I do think there is reasonable interpretation to say that there is good freedom and bad freedom. Weird Red is definitely bad freedom. I just think that I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't like I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it's impossible to say that freedom there are certain freedoms that are good things, but the way things are trending, I don't know. I'm dubious of shadow crystals still. I made an entire short debunking how the knight isn't that the knight knighting Kris, explaining how the flavor text is basically just how it's meant to go down. Obviously, there's more, but I already talked about this verbally. If you want to like link me that video or whatever, I'll watch it later. If you like join my Discord or whatever. I don't know if you can send links in here or like at me on Twitter or something. Oh wait, the thing is bleeding through. Do you see that on the thing? That's funny. Um, my like weird color overlay is bleeding through a little bit. That's funny. Anyway, how is Kris slash theory nearsighted? I really didn't understand this point. Unlike Kris Knight theory, this isn't some big overarching theory that tries to explain the whole story or anything. Really, it's mostly about making one scene make sense. The only lasting implication for the rest of the game is that Kris is powerful, more powerful than they're willing to show us. Judging by other interactions like them doing extra damage to Tenna in the sword route and X/, I didn't know that. Uh, I wonder if that's true. I think that's a pretty reasonable conclusion. It also makes sense thematically. Kris is strong. They shouldn't need us. They probably hate that they need us. But just like spams and strings, without us, something terrible will happen. So they suffer our control, at least until they get rid of us. Hi. Hi, Stella the Great. Um, and too many Discord servers already, so I guess I can't really link the short. Okay. Well, I can probably just click on your thing later and look at it. Um, the reason why I think, and I think a lot of people too are misconstruing me, like, um, people are bringing their own interpretations of Kris slash and other people's elaborations of Kris slash into this discussion when I am expressly talking about Double Dan's video. And Double Dan's video propagates Kris slash as an explanation for other things as well, like Kris Knight or like Kris being a secondary knight, you know, that kind of thing. So that's why I think it's nearsighted. That's cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Kris does extra damage to Tenna. Neat. Crazy. That's why I didn't know that. But yeah, I think the reason why I'm saying it's nearsighted is because this person's version of it, the person who popularized it, and the only version of the Kris slash I had seen propagated by others was that version of Chris Slash. Therefore, I believed it was nearsighted. Now, yeah. Obviously, like if the whole point is like to showcase that Chris is on the Knight's side, one, they don't need to be slashing to do that. The Chris is just on the Knight's side, uh, somehow, some way. So you don't need to make an entire theory about that. And two, this entire video would be pointless. Um, Five. Yeah, I think you're right about Chris making a deal on behalf of the Knight. Don't know what Double Dan was on about there. Yeah, I think that was pretty whack. We seen as the page as a page of the Knight as Chris wears the colors of death. A page of the Knight? Do you mean like? I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, they're definitely in cahoots. No one is arguing that they're in cahoots. If you don't think the Knight and Chris are in cahoots, you're like, how high do you even have to be just to think something like that? One of the biggest points for Chris Slash theory, which wasn't really brought up, is why the Knight knights Chris. By any metric, the victory against the Knight is a failure on Chris's end. They failed to stop us from obtaining the Shadow Mantle. They failed to stop us and Susie from fighting the Knight. Their inaction nearly got the Knight an axe to the face. Why does the Knight reward them? I think the scene only really works if Chris did the slash, thus proving their royalty. Hmm. Hmm. That's interesting. One of the biggest points. One of the biggest points, which wasn't really brought up, is why the Knight is Chris. By any metric, the victory against Knight is a failure on Chris's end. They failed to stop us from obtaining the Shadow Mantle. They failed to stop us from choosing. Well, I don't know. It's the. Hmm. I'm trying to formulate thoughts on this one. They failed to stop us from obtaining the Shadow Mantle. They failed to stop us. Which is to say, you think that the Knight is not strong enough to do the thing that they did, or that I think they did, more like. Who's to say that the Knight was not holding back for reasons like the fact that Chris was there? They already are shown to be holding back against Chris. I just don't think that you can come to the conclusion based on the fact that they failed to do certain things when they literally can't do anything about it. Like Chris can't do anything about it other than like rip the soul out, but they obviously can't do that all the time. Yeah, Chris did make the fountain for him. Though I think if I were to like argue the reason they got knighted is because they made the fountain, that would be just ridiculous. Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable to believe that the knight can insta swoon. I think the knight's a lot stronger than people are giving the knight credit for. In regards to like Chris Slash, because a lot of people seem to believe that Chris was like saving the knight in a way, and I just don't. I don't think that's true. I agree. Yeah, I agree that the knighting was more symbolic. And also, like like I brought up in the video, the knighting is the only reason we know, like for 1000% certain, that Chris is working with the knight somehow. Yeah, it's one of the if you've ever played Mother 3, uh, or if you know anything about Mother 3, it's like how you fight the masked man like halfway through the game. You know, it's exactly like that. Which I could get into more, how the masked man and how the knight are very similar. Not because it's not true, but because the knight is supposed to be a strong entity, and night swooning is to show how insanely strong the knight is. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think the creator was asserting that Chris Slash was absolutely true and the Night Slash is wrong. I don't think the creator is even necessarily a Chris Slash believer. This is untrue. He says in his video that he is a Chris Slash believer, but in his video he also is very wishy-washy. He like props up these. He says he does prop it up as like a possibility, and then says that he believes the possibility given all of the evidence, which to me sounds like he believes that Chris Knight is true, and thus means that there is room for someone to be like, I actually don't think that it is, which is why I made the video. The video is more about exploring the Kris/ concept, how sound it is, and how everything around it can be plausibly interpreted in that light, thus forming a functional theory. So what the video actually proves is how, if he wanted to, Toby Fox would be capable of having a Kris betrayal revealed in a later chapter without it being a plot hole. I don't know about that. I don't think I agree with that. There's no way the knight wasn't just giving the party a chance because they knew the party stood absolutely no chance against them if they went all out. Yeah, that's kind of what I believe. It's kind of what I, that's kind of the way that I trend as well. For some people, enough reason to choose to believe it. Oh, no, for some people, that's enough reason to choose to believe it until proven otherwise. Yes, exactly like Kris Knight, which is why I drew the Kris Knight OG version, which is exactly why I drew the parallel. I don't think some people seem. I'll get into it later, but whatever. I'll get into it later. But that's the reason why I drew the parallel. It's fun, and even if it happens to be revealed to be wrong, there's zero consequences as it's all fictional and exists only in our heads anyway. I also say that at the end of the video. I say that this is just a thing that we're all passionate about. Um, so don't hate people. My favorite part of the original video was him using the Japanese version to prove how Ralsei's "How could you" was meant to be interpreted as a moral accusation. That's awful. Why would you do that? Yeah, which is I didn't bring that up because I already was like I didn't bring up the fact that the Japanese dialogue, which I had confirmed by a secondary source, um, was or like I had a secondary source read over the Japanese dialogue to make sure it wasn't being misinterpreted because it was just a YouTube comment. I don't trust YouTube comments very much, as one would imagine, given all of the comments I got on this video. But I just think that it's by far the strongest piece of evidence, and there's no way that you can concretely debunk it. You can only offer alternate interpretation, so there's no point in trying to say that it's wrong because I can't for sure say that it's wrong. Like I can say the sword route stuff is wrong. Brings up the Kris does extra damage to the knight if Susie and Ralsei are swooned. They clearly don't like them getting hurt, depending on how the knight. Yeah, that's another thing too. It is. That is a very interesting point actually. The fact that they like still fight despite. That is so. You're so right, TJ Frank. That's a very. I don't think I could ever like work that into a theory, but or work that in, I could have worked that into the video, but you're very right about that. No fun allowed on video. Thank you, Ninja942. Who cares if any theory is short-sighted? We're working with what we have. By that logic, we should all hang up our hats until the full game releases. Incorrect. That is a fallacy. I don't know. I can't remember the name of the fallacy. I think it's slippery slope. Is that slippery slope? Not sure, but this is fallacious. Um, applies to every theory. The original video didn't even think the evidence was definitive. It was just the most logical explanation to the weirdness of that scene. Um, uh, yeah, well, no theory is definitive. Like the theory of gravity isn't definitive, despite all of us believing in it. So I'm still allowed to like poke fun and say that I don't like it. Unlike Kris Knight theory, there is nothing in the game that actually discrediting Kris/theory besides for the file name, while also having some good supporting evidence that you yourself showed. Uh, with Kris Knight too, originally there was also nothing discrediting it. So you're further cementing why I drew the comparison. This video more so discredited some of Double Dan's faulty evidence, with Ralsei looking straight and Kris killing their friends and the mental minigame being correlated to them downing their friends, but those were by far the weakest pieces of evidence towards the theory, which he propagated as the strongest points of evidence in the theory. That's your opinion. Though I actually don't really think this theory deserves such discussion because it's a fairly small event. If Kris did strike their friends down, I do think it works better with the whole knighting thing, Ralsei's dialogue, and Kris hiding their true power from us. Um, uh, well, the reason why, so this is another thing too that I guess I should have clarified because I didn't really think about it while I was making the video. But the reason why I'm choosing to debunk or I chose to make this video on Kris Slash is because the Kris Slash video itself, the one that propagates everything, aka Double Dance video, uses it to say that Kris is going to be a second knight, and I don't like that. I don't think that's true. So um, yeah, there's another way you can interpret the scene where it's just that Kris slashing is Kris just working with the knight still, And because you can interpret it that way, some people are coming to this video with that interpretation in mind, and therefore being like, "What are you doing, Rancid? You're acting ridiculous." Which is I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that possibility. Short-sighted on my part. I should have clarified that it was. I mean, I did say that I'm debunking it as propped up by Double Dan, but I guess I should have made it more clear. I'm gonna do anything if you manage to get to the knight in the hall in chapter 4. Yeah, Kris doesn't like hurting their friends. Yeah, I yeah. TLDR, I basically bring up some counterpoints I found from a Google search and simply explain why the video just doesn't work afterwards. Counterpoints I found against the Kris theory by doing a very simple Google search. I think that they're on my side. Kris damage is heavily, yeah. We have a 15-minute long video and a comment that's missed the entire point of what a theory is meant to be and tried to dismiss the points made for the theory by saying, I simply don't believe it, or citing slash PNGs as evidence towards our interpretation is dumb, but we're not even trying to explain why it's otherwise more likely to have been the knight than Kris, and a Google search gave me objective counterpoints. That intro at the start was just to deflect criticism, wasn't it? No, it definitely wasn't. Um, my whole point was to like debunk everything that was in the video. I wasn't trying to propagate. Hey there, I'm one of the people who was saying you were being toxic. Hello. I actually like value you being here the most of all. I'm really glad that I want those people here specifically so that they can tell me exactly what they thought was being toxic. I want the criticism. So what exactly do you believe was toxic about it? Like you really came across as if you felt as though if OP was stupid for coming to the conclusions that he did, and that you were annoyed that you had to explain things to them. That's like by far that's like super reasonable, I think. I hate how they explain themselves. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I mean, okay. I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but I did mention before that the video before tonally had more things in it that were like directed towards Double Dan the guy himself, and I cut those things because I thought that they weren't relevant and also like actually mean. I think I can actually just pull up the document, like the script I have written. There's a or I'll pull it up and read it. I'll pull up and read what I'm talking about because I still have it in the script. Hold on. I also think that me like I the title for sure is 100% incendiary, and I think a lot of people because the title is so incendiary, um, people came in also with a preconceived notion that I just was like mean. Thank you, Model 124. Okay, so I'm going to read off one of the parts that I cut because I thought it was like too mean. In the follow-up video, in an attempt to bolster his interpretation of the Sword Art Money game, Mr. Doubledan says this about Kris killing their friends. And what he says is, if I can recall, you know what? Let's just find it so I don't misquote it and look like a total douchebag. Doubledan. It's in the second video, and it's near the end, if I recall correctly. Like people most also yeah, I'm a knight slash believer, but I felt the video was pretty rare at the time. It could be that I just misfired. Anyway, I'll get more into all of your chat messages in just a second. But let me see if I can find what I'm trying to reference by this.
Rouse and Susie in danger from them.
No,
But
no,
yes, this
no,
part
no.
of this moment of hopefully doesn't want to have to kill Rouse and Susie to save
This
them.
is it, yeah.
To me, it's a moment of solidarity between
This sucks. I'm sorry, but like this is pretty bad.
again, it's conflicting motivations. Now, what I find interesting about this minigame is that, to me, it's a moment of solidarity between Kris and the player, and it happens in the same chapter. Now, the player, hopefully, doesn't want to have to.
He's calling the fact that you are forcing Kris to kill their friends a moment of solidarity between Kris and the player, which I think is just so bad. Like I just think that sucks. And then I think that's just completely incorrect. So I wrote like an entire thing and cut this because I thought it was a little too mean and like too personal. I wanted to keep it more about the theory. Reading Kris killing Susie and Ralsei in the Sword Road game as a moment of solidarity between Kris and the player is not only ridiculous, but fundamentally misunderstands Deltarune, its themes, and especially the weird route. Obviously, we don't want to hurt Susie and Ralsei. Obviously, Kris doesn't either, but we are making Kris hurt them. The whole point of that scene is that we are making Kris hurt them. Hey, I wonder where else in this game making Kris do things they really don't want to do might be present. Wait, what? What is there? What? I don't even remember what else that was about. Oh yeah, and then after this, he says that the sword route minigame can't be about the weird route, or can't be foreshadowing events in the weird route because where you kill Kris and Ralsei, that's taking place in what is obviously meant to be representation of Cyber City. So and which is also like woefully like disingenuous, not disingenuous, but like woefully bad faith interpretation. So I'm like, Uh, I mean, really, take things literally to a comical degree. Metaphor doesn't exist and correlation triumphs all. Therefore, my theory is stated. This is precisely the issue with Chris Slash right here. How do you come to a conclusion so willfully incorrect or blinded or just downright stupid unless you are attempting to confirm a bias? Why are you so reticent to admit these minigames are about the weird route? Why can't you just cite Rousey's dialogue? I would have no video, but but there would be no theory either. Searching for evidence is one thing, misinterpreting the text in order to construct evidence is another. How else is a conclusion as ill-baked and literal reached? I think that was I still think it's kind of funny, but it's like way too mean and way too like pointed at the guy himself. And because like the goal is for him to watch it and not feel like bad, you know? Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was. Let me scroll up and chat a little bit because I was focused on that. The tone was bad. Whole thing felt like you were calling him stupid. Listen to it again and pay attention to your tone. I was aware that you were playing a character, but that's kind of lazy, man. Well, I wholeheartedly agree with your video. I don't think it's appropriate for you to play a character in a video counter arguing against the theory. I disagree with you. I think there's a way you can do it, and I just evidently like failed. Hey, found your channel through the. Yeah, I already read that. It sounded like an expose video or an H-bomber guy video instead of a debunking theory video. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I think the H-bomber guy comparison is apt because I like that guy's videos, but mm, I think because he's also very hyperbolic. You have to understand. Did stream die? I don't think so. Okay, cool. Um, yeah, well, it was pretty. There's some pretty like mean jabs in there, and I think because originally that's what I was building to. There's a lot of like um there's a lot of like of that stuff that like that tonally remains in a way that it shouldn't have. Also, originally there were going to be more interludes with more character bits, and I cut those because I couldn't do them in a way that I liked, which probably also would have helped convey the idea that I am playing a hyperbolic character as opposed to like actually just being a dick. Much doesn't much because yeah, I agree with you, local. That's I mentioned that earlier. That's part of the issue. Some people are coming to the discussion believing exactly what you're believing, that it doesn't actually matter all that much. Uh, yeah, which further muddies discussion about my video and his video. Anyway, let's get back to the comments. Point being, I agonized over my portrayal of this guy. I sent it to people, or my portrayal of myself and how I was like talking about this about Double Dan. I sent it to people. They said it was fine. Like friends and acquaintances, I had them read it over and they said it was fine. And people disagreed. Provided slash theory is actually true, I really hope Toby doesn't walk back and retcon it because of how weirdly hostile and confrontational the community is with each other's theories. I don't think he would do that. If Kris could swoon Rousey, and Susie couldn't, they have just couldn't they have just done that to spam to Neo in the weird route instead of having to call Noel? Um, well, if you were to abide by the logic of the Kris Knight theory, you would, or the Kris slash theory, you would just say that Kris is, and also not even just by Kris slash, but like by the game itself, you would totally just be able to say, well, Kris doesn't want to show the player that they can do that, which is reasonable. Like you can totally say that and it makes sense. That wouldn't be a thing I could bring up. Also, I don't know how to say her name. I'm just gonna call you Extreme. I think the evidence with X slash I think isn't very good. I think that's very like circumstantial. I think you could like maybe use it to show that Kris doesn't want to show us their full power. I think you could make that argument and I wouldn't be able to say no or like be like, "Hey, I'm gonna make a 15-minute long video debunking you." But I didn't bring it up because I felt it was like way too semantic. The fact that it's an X slash that's slashing twice and that the sound effect is like kind of similar, I thought it was way too semantic, so I just didn't bring it up because it would result in me being like, this is too semantic and bad, which is what people didn't like about the video anyway. Who knows? Uh, all right. One of my friends said they don't like engaging with Deltarune fandom stuff. I was baffled by this because I have listened to hundreds of hours of Let's Plays and speedruns and comic dubs and predictions and theories. Then I see the title and thumbnail for this video and skim the comments and now I have a very good idea of why my friend just sticks to the game. The theory slave, I don't have no idea why what they're trying to I guarantee this is a typo, but I don't know what the word is trying to be. The theory slave is sort of like people having exploratory debates to find new possibilities to puzzle that are complex and typically unsolvable. It's not typically personal attacks nor meant to imply that disagreeing is bad. And admittedly, I had seen one other theory channel that has kind of bad tact in handling their opinions, but was very careful to brand their opinions as such. Anyway, I shouldn't have written this. This increased engagement means the video will be shown to more people. I'm happy to see more Undertale Deltarune speculation and analysis, but if it's going to evolve and devolve into a pissing match, I'll just stop clicking on Undertale Deltarune videos and move back to retro computers and ROM hacks or something. Um, it's not a pissing match. Uh, I don't ever personally insult the guy. I insult his, well, not even insult, I just call it bad. Well, I guess that is insulting. I call the theory bad. I never, I make a very big point out of not personally attacking the guy because that would be over the line and ridiculous. And that's why I cut that thing from earlier because I thought it was way too personal. Um, yeah, I don't ever personally attack the guy. Sorry that it was like that, I guess. I honestly don't really see how your reasoning proves Chris Slash is false. I agree to disagree on your takes. There is I don't know why this is happening. Let me click read more. Also, you do not need to be toxic just because you're playing a character doesn't mean cyberbullying is okay. Also, isn't the whole point of the theory to predict what happens in the next chapters? The Ralsei point is a bit weak, but still, Ralsei is looking directly forward, and also it's getting cut off, unfortunately. You can't say that for certain. Um, he is. I don't agree. I disagree with the prediction, which is why I made the video, and I don't cyberbully him in my view. I just think I'm being like hyperbolic and also blunt with my opinion. Like if I ever like I think people assume that if I were in I was in the same room as if I was in the same room as Double Dan, I would like jump down his throat. No, at all. I would actually have a very reasonable discussion with him. I'd be like, this is why I dislike this thing, and I think this interpretation was bad for this for reason X, Y, and Z. And I'm sure that he would be like, oh, okay. And I disagree with the points that you made in your video, blah blah blah. And then we would like shake hands or whatever. They never said anything about the guy directly and only called their theory dumb. Yeah, I didn't. I that was a very, very big point. I never called the guy dumb. 1000 Jacksons, but the system didn't make it across by the way he spoke. Yeah. Learning, growing pains, growing pains, growing pains. I'm new to this, okay? This is the most amount of attention I've ever had. It's a little scary. I cannot lie. Kris killed Susie and Ralsei is on the same wavelength of Chara did the genocide route. Yeah, that's kind of the issue I had with it. Okay, but Ralsei is a facing upward sprite, looking down sprite that isn't used. I don't know what sprite he's talking about. They're talking about. I don't know. That's a guy. And I also, I don't know, dubious. Uh, you have one more point? Please share. Kris wouldn't need to resort to calling people for help if he could have, or they could have. Oh, they could have beat Spimpton. Oh, 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Oh, the sound from X slash is almost the exact same as the swoon. I think that's dubious info. I know about that. That was in the other video. I just don't put stock in it. I think that's way too semantic. Ugh. I feel like if you had like really, really good concrete evidence, like if there was more for the theory to go off of, then you could cite that and be like, here's even more. It's kind of, I mean, I don't know if I don't really have, I don't know. I agree with you a little bit. Twisted Turk. Uh, Jesus Christ. So I don't know if I'm gonna read any like two more of these like super long ones because I do have things to do. But you say that he goes back on it and says in the follow-up that it actually makes more sense for it to come from the little. That's pretty dishonest. You literally play the clip of him. Yes, I disagree that I shouldn't have said hypocrite. That was a bad choice of words. Um, and I should just cut that entire point entirely. You're correct to critique me on that. Your next point about the face sprites is incredibly weak. If the intention was for Ralsei to be looking down at Susie, there are face sprites for Ralsei that are looking downward, such as the one literally right before it, where his pupils are a pixel lower. It would be incredibly easy to make another sprite. I think that's dubious. You also say it would also be incredibly easy for the scene to be less ambiguous. You also say what the Tina dialogue is that the Tina dialogue is meant to be a parallel of him getting betrayed by Spamton. It is. It's still a parallel even if Tina is calling Kris the Knight, as he's been betrayed by an individual working with Kris, who you claim is the one Kris is relaying demands from. The parallel is completely intact. Uh, yeah, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be intact, but I think that the whole point of that scene is to parallel the betrayal and to highlight the fact, if it wasn't already obvious by the fact that Kris made the fountain, but like that Kris and Tenna are like connected in a way, you know? Let me read over the chat really quick. They're both strong slashing attacks, so sharing the game sound is kind of a given. My problem with Kris Slash's theory is that it's unnecessary overcomplication. Yeah, Occam's razor. I agree. I plan to make a night video as well, like a X character as the night video as well to highlight how like the how fandoms tend to do that because I think it's interesting. How do people not understand your points? Are they media illiterate? I don't. I think well, one, a lot of like teenagers like Deltarune. Okay, you have to understand this. There are younger people who are watching this. Two, I think a lot of people came primed with like this preconceived idea of discourse from like Twitter or something. Because there are comments throughout this thing that are saying things to me like, "You are what is wrong with you are the reason why you are the prime example of Delta and toxicity." And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I think that people came in with this preconceived idea and ready to discourse about something. So, the in chapter 5, Kris turned to the camera and say, I slash Susan Rossi in chapter 3. True. I agree with you. Critical construction. Anyway, the best evidence for Kris slash them is ultimately that it makes the least assumptions. I just don't agree with that. That's crazy. We have no reason to believe from what we can see in the game that the knight swooned Susie and Ralsei. There was only a vague mention of Kris feeling something behind their head. Kris is very clearly centered as the origin point of the slash graphic both times. Yeah, also you don't literally see the slash that happens to Tina, but it's centered on him. So if we want to make that argument, then we can make that argument, and I would have evidence to back up my claim. The knight completely disappears from view, and it would have been incredibly easy to tweak the sprite to make it very obvious that the knight did attacks. But as seen in with chapter two, Toby likes to play games and leave things ripe for speculation and keep them dubious, so that we are, you know, blah blah blah. But again, there is none of that. Occam's razor points to Kris. I disagree with that. Toby obviously wants this to be a reasonable belief. I agree with you. I think that he does want it to be a thing that people can conclude. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made the scene as dubious as it was, unless he was trying to communicate Toriel slash. Just like OG Kris Knight. Yes, this is precisely why I drew the parallel to Kris Knight. It was my very first thought upon seeing the scene as well. The video came across as incredibly mean-spirited and demeaning while doing very little to actually debunk the points brought up. The video was easily disregarded. Okay, I see you. I don't believe in Kris slash 3. I just thought the video tone was kind of weird. Yeah, I think I probably went a little too hard. Growing pains. My dog is upset about something. One second. One second. One second. All right, so something has come up and I am going to have to cut this short a little bit. I might stream again a little later tonight in about like an hour or so, but I hope that at least some of the people that thought that I was evil came and saw this and were like, maybe you're not actually, you know. So maybe be back a little later tonight. Sorry for abrupt cutoff. Yes, I want to go over this more. Yes.